So I'm just going to show the oiling out process again, and I just feel it's such a sort of crucial part of my painting practice. It's just really worth getting a very, very clear understanding. So I might just continue showing this, because it's just something that comes with a lot of practice, I've found, and I still don't necessarily get it right every single time, but it just does make so much difference if it's done properly. If I can take the time to do it properly, and it'll just really change your painting practice, because it just really makes the experience so much more pleasurable. So whatever medium you're using, it honestly doesn't matter. It could just be some cold pressed linseed oil or stand oil, linseed oil that's been boiled. I'm using an alkyd medium, so it's walnut oil with alkyd. It's by M. Graham. I'm not plugging it, but it works for me because it does dry out quicker than just linseed oil. Linseed oil can take days otherwise, I find. So I've just literally very liberally brushed it over the surface, and this surface I've primed just once because I quite like the effect of a sort of loose brushwork. It adds a little bit more depth. And then I've completed the line drawing, and I used a grid to do that because it's just a great time-saving device. So it's going to be available as well as a print at this stage if anyone wants to try and work along with this demonstration. But for now, so I've painted it on, and then I'm just going to use my trusty rag, and I'm just going to rub it off. You've got to be careful with these rags because they do pick up a few hairs here and there, which is a bit annoying. So we don't want it to be too much. We don't want it to be too sloppy. And so what I do is just look at it from the side, and it should just have a very nice sheen to it. And you should be able to see if there are bits that you haven't actually rubbed down, because they'll stick out. They'll be very, very, very shiny. And so it should be like a sort of silk effect. And it does vary. I've done it softly there. I could do it a little bit more, but I think, that's just how I feel, it should work today. And without further ado, I'm just going to carry on. I'm just going to start painting. And so the purpose of this video is just to show sort of the very simple process of blocking in a painting. And so I'm going to use sort of fairly limited palettes. I've got just white, and I've got a gold ochre actually, but it's a yellow ochre is fine. I'm using raw umber, vermilion, ultramarine blue, and a sap green, quite a cool sap green. It's a Michael Harding sap green, and maybe I'll add a little bit of black to that as well. That's one thing I was going to do. It's not black. Excuse me, here's my black. Okay, a bit of black. Yeah, so we'll see how this feels. It's going to be fairly slick, possibly too much, but that's okay. So just starting, you can see the reference. I'm just not going to show the palette because it's fairly straightforward, and it's all open. We don't need to get it exactly right, because part of the pleasure of using glazes is that we can make adjustments with those glazes very, very easily. So I'm just using a bit of black and a bit of sap green together. And you can use any size brush you want. I do like my, what are they, number 2s, 2 long flats I use, and it's a hog's hair. And the idea is just to sort of colour it in. It's a bit paint by numbers at this stage. I haven't put any medium on the palette, so the medium's all on the surface of the painting. The oiling out process, or oiling in, whatever you want to call it, is it's very intuitive, and it's just something you'll just get a feel for how you like it when you're painting. I can't stress too strongly that how much it changes the experience for me. So it feels quite dry here, I don't know why. It's definitely on there. But there will be painters who like it very, very liquid, very sort of, not sloppy, but very liquid on the surface, so it's very fluid when the paint goes on. There are other painters who sort of enjoy the friction, the tension possibly you would get when it's drier and you're sort of having to scratch the paint on almost. They're just different sensations, and different people will gain pleasure in whatever sensation gets them going. I quite like leaving it on the surface as well, so that you can just sort of mix your paint up and it's going to be consistent, because there's always going to be the medium there anyway. Sometimes paint comes out of the tube quite dry, with less oil, I suppose. So, you know, I would need to mix a little bit up on my palette as well. But so I always go on about it, but it's such a good thing if you get it right. And I've only got it right through trial and error, and even yesterday I did a painting and it wasn't, you know, somehow it just rubbed off too much. I'm not very good at sort of, if I haven't got it right, stopping and then redoing it unless it's really, really bad. That's a good thing about it as well. You can see I was just able to take it off very easily there. If I'd just gone over the drawing. Bit of time here. Can use a smaller brush. Ooh. So I reckon hopefully within the hour we'll be able to cover this enough just so it's blocked in, and then we can have a happy day doing some very enjoyable glazing. Okay, so you can see the tone it's very similar in this part of the painting, so I can use a bit of ochre possibly, just mix this in. It's going to be quite similar to what it is. The board I'm using isn't exact size, but I'll cut it down afterwards. You can see that it's a bit lighter down there. So it's only to about the top of the sheaves of corn, or sheaves of wheat. And it's just sort of, let's get an idea, you know, we don't need to worry too much about the colour, because I can go over that. That looks quite a sharp green there, so maybe it's sort of a viridian or something. And there's some blues in here too. These shapes are sort of bluey. A bit more. Oh gosh, goodness gracious. I'm doing this fairly rapidly, but you know, please take your time. Really choose whatever colour you feel fits. And we don't need to worry too much about the drawing either. It's approximately right. And you can use, you know, solid areas of colour as well. But I'm just, I do like colour to have that translucency and depth. So sometimes just a sort of thin glaze at this stage I tend to use. So it's just got that bluey texture. Maybe some areas. Sometimes I like to sort of, if I could, for example, I've got this this other hog's hair, larger hog's hair, where it's a bit lighter. I can just take off some of the paint, just to create some. There are areas here where the folds of the dress are just slightly lighter, so I can just use that to do a bit of drawing there. Likewise up here, and the folds of the dress coming down. And you know, the further glazes will work wonders. They can transform that. It might look really messy at the moment, but it's just sort of get a feel for the value, get a feel for the colour, not to worry too much. For example, now we've got this, I've just mixed quite a light greeny blue for this area. It gets lighter still, and there's some of it is actually in here too. It's important to just sort of cover all of the surface, so it's quite a lot darker. Palette's pretty messy. Some people like to mix the colours up on the palette beforehand with a knife. I'm generally a bit more, well, yeah, anyway, yeah, just quite intuitive with the way I do it on the canvas and on the palette. Right, I mean, that's not really right, is it? So I'm going to go back to my just a bit of ultramarine and a more white now. Might add some medium just because this has got the alkyd in and will help it dry. It's quite thin, so I can still see the drawing underneath anyway. And over here, it's kind of nearly the right value. And then the sky sort of melts into the sky really on the horizon. It's the right value, but it's not high enough chroma, so I'm going to, with the glaze, you know, I could just go over with a lovely sort of ultramarine, maybe a bit of cobalt in there as well, cobalt blue, and that'll just look really, really nice. So actually, it's probably just honestly a bit of, it's not this yellow strictly, but I'm going to do it this time, and then I'll add the yellow as the glaze. Yeah, I bought this gold ochre. I was just looking for a very, very translucent yellow for some other paintings I was doing. Just obsessed with translucent paint. So I can still see the drawing, but I'll just go over it. You can still see all the wheat. goes very dark when it's in the shadow, but I'll just block this in. It's just so enjoyable because I don't have to worry too much. The drawing's there and I can just get some colour on. This is pure painting. This hog's hair has got a slightly scratchy quality, but I can smooth that a little bit. And, very straightforward. So now I'm going to use some of this ochre, but pure, with a tiny bit of medium. It's just probably I need to got some raw umber in there too now. So just to pick up where it's really in shadow. Stay fairly close to the drawing, not to worry too much. Just go right to the edge of the painting there. And details will all come in later. I can use the brush strokes as well to sort of give a sense of the direction of the wheat. There's a little bit of this. It's quite striking the way the dress, just at this bottom left hand corner of the painting, it just melts into the surrounding landscape. And I've said it before that the surface of the painting sort of becomes a palette and you're mixing as you go. Right, this is it's actually really dark in here. Really, this is just actually quite flat, and all you can see is the dress, and then the way he's done the way it's just sort of literally it's just a few highlights at the end of the painting. So we'll just see how that goes. Actually, so it's quite close in terms of colour to the shadow in the shirt, so I'm going to use it for that in her blouse. Not exactly, but so we'll model this with a bit of white in a sec. I don't want this to be too green, but it's not quite. There's only white in the highlights. It's not just white, that's the point. Oof. It's quite green. Okay, Basically, I'm really lazy and I just keep painting without cleaning my brush or changing my brush. I get into problems. Okay, so white definitely needs a little bit of medium. Please tell me if you think this isn't proper blocking in, because honestly I don't exactly know. But this is a way that works for me when I'm painting. And I'm going through it fairly rapidly because I want it to be watchable. But you know, it could be a few goes. It doesn't have to be this quick. It's whatever works, really. Got my other brush that I was using before that was very green, but if I just add a bit of yellow, a bit of this gold ochre, and start to paint this bit. Oh, sorry, I don't know if someone's doing some gardening, someone's grinding something up. So you got that to accompany, we've all got that to accompany us. It's not this warm actually in the original. You can see again how, yeah, I mean there's the pencil, but it just sort of melts into the surrounding landscape. That's not right. So the drawing, that bit goes up into there, just where her blouse is tucked in, her waistcoat, corset, what is it? All the details I'll paint in after. I'm going to mix up a dark flesh tone now. I've got vermilion and some raw umber. I can still see the drawing. Well, I don't know if you can, but it's quite clear from where I am. So, just going over, that's fine, and I can just glaze over the whole thing. Other hand in shadow. So I think that's as far as I want to take the hand there, because I'll be able to sort of just, I can still see the drawing in there, so when I am doing the second layer, the second glaze, I'll be able to pick out those little bits, so I'll be able to delete and you know, mark the fingers and just create a little bit more shadow. So Just wait for that bit. And yeah, there's no alizarin crimson on my palette today, but normally that's what I'll use when I do the glazing. It'll be, got my warm sap green and the alizarin crimson, and that works wonders to create final glazes for the skin in shadow. Actually, so I've got a little bit of the very light colour I used for there that I can just paint a finger in. And so now I've got some white on my palette and got a bit of vermilion, and let's have a little bit of ochre. See what this looks like. Definitely yellower than that. Still pretty red. So I'm going to go again. I'll just put some white in the earlier mix I did. That feels better. So I've got one brush for the lighter tones of the skin and another still for the shadows. And I'm just mixing in a bit of the gold ochre, the yellow ochre into my vermilion and umber. Looking at it, well, we'll see. Just wondering about the drawing around here. I think that's something we'll go over with the glaze. Using the brush to pick off some of the paint too. And yeah, so I have this shadow and it's exclusively warm. It's got the ochre, the vermilion and a little bit of raw umber, but in the area here in the shadow it's green almost. So I think I'm going to try and get that with a bit of a glaze later. I'll just try and get some of the value nearly right. I'm just going to mix a little bit of the green and I can't resist it. Might possibly make it harder to do. I've got it, it's much lighter here, it's a little bit pink. But this is what glazing is going to be for. We'll just have to go over it. You just have to trust me on this one. Just tidying up the drawing ever so slightly, just going to cut in. That's one thing, I must make sure I don't neglect the drawing when I do it so fast. But easily repairable anyway. Right, that's ooh, okay. It's just not right, but that's fine. It's absolutely fine. You can see what I'm trying to do. You can see this area around here, but at the moment I've got a very sort of cool green on my brush. I can just go over between, so I'm just drifting across into the landscape, but the landscape is definitely lighter. So we can just correct that. So the landscape cuts up against the figure, and she's in shadow against it, lit up. So likewise, it's all adjustments, so easy to make really, and with more time, you can just spend ages modelling it and having a really good old time with the brush. Lovely paint, lovely surface. So that's going to be so enjoyable. It's probably the loosest thing I've had to copy since making these films. So yeah, what a pleasure that's been. Right, and the sky's got just, I did mark in, there's just some areas on the drawing where I just sort of marked out some of the areas of blue. But apart from that, it's quite orangey. So I'll just do some very, very light patches of ultramarine. We'll see what that looks like. A bit of medium. So I'm having so much fun, I'm forgetting I have to do the face, which is going to be a challenge. Okay, so I'm not going to get too bogged down in this today. I think it does need probably some more cerulean blue for the lower areas of sky. So we'll do that later on. So I'm not copying it exactly, it's just a nice sunny day, that's all it is, with a little bit of cloud. Yeah, it's actually a sunny day here today, so yeah, I can even look out the window to get a reference. I would say ultramarine blue is a nice blue, but there's something about it I don't like. It's a bit purpley or something. Certainly it's not the best blue for skies. And there are other ones that are better. Cerulean is lovely, cobalt is lovely, but I think if you're painting a sky, it's we're mixing lots of different blues. Right, so now that was my white brush, now that's gone. But see, I've got the same bit of ochre mixed up with white, and that's getting close to what this is. Just got to be careful because the original drawing's still showing through, so not too much medium. A little bit more. I'm just doing some white with some ochre. Just bear in mind, it is just a demonstration, so it's not going to be perfect. I did actually try and copy a Van Eyck painting. There's a man in a blue chaperon, and you could look it up, or Man in a Blue Cap by Van Eyck, because I thought, oh yeah, that would be really good. Maybe I can do a demonstration of the Flemish technique and the 7 steps. I might have cheated and only done 6, but I'm not sure how filmable it is. I sort of did the first, I was doing the first step, and it's like you have to be so careful to get it anything resembling the original that I just thought, like, gosh, that's going to take like at least an hour's video, an hour's filming. So and then I just thought, oh, I don't know, is that really me? I really enjoy that sort of process because it's quite similar to, if I was carving a stone portrait when I was carving portraits in marble. So I'm definitely able to focus and spend a while getting something absolutely spot on, but it does take a long time. Though marble portrait might take upwards of a month solid labour just to do. So definitely that's not going to be something that's filmable. Likewise with this Van Eyck, it's just it's a shame. I might do one, but it's just a lot, and I don't know how enjoyable that would be to watch. So look, that's just a little bit of yellow ochre and white, and it's pretty close to the way he's done it. So I'm just literally painting right across the drawing there to just hide that, to lose that. Now I can see where it was anyway. It's all blocked in. It's very rough, and that's absolutely fine. And just again, how enjoyable to just paint a sky like this. You can just let your mind wander, and that will lend itself to further glazes, and probably exactly the same process that I've just done. Maybe a little bit more colour, maybe a little bit less, a little bit of white here, some more blues there, different blues, and we'll be able to create a lovely effect of sky. Okay, so and then I've got that. It's very light that I used, and that's sort of what it looks like here. On top of the shirt, where the shirt's really catching the light over her shoulder. Much more white, and maybe that just gives the impression of what it'll be like come the first glaze. I'll just do a bit more of that because that looked good. So just a bit of glaze, just a bit of medium. So yeah, definitely. So this has got a fair amount of ochre in it, relatively speaking. And yeah, so it's not really strict blocking in. I don't know what that is. The point is just to sort of get a feel for the colours. It's almost like a dress rehearsal. So we kind of just do the initial looking, isn't it? The initial just feeling our way into a painting. And one thing I want to do is, as well as copying quite a few paintings from by various painters. It's to do some of my own work as well, because how do I then, I've learnt this, how do I take what I've learned and start using it in my own work? So we can just sort of see how we'd adapt it. Okay, so on the same brush, but I've just found a little bit on my palette of just this, just a tiny bit of sap green and white. So you can see I'm just pushing it there, just pushing it up. That's all quite dark in there, so I'm not going to go there. But it's not as dark as I've done it around here, and it's definitely softer. But you'll see it will just be absolutely brilliant with the glazing. Just because glazing is such a beautiful approach with painting, with paint. Okay, yeah, so it's not working that well there, but that's fine. So in context, when everything's sort of there, you can see that you can see how this starts to work a little bit more. I mean, it looks quite odd when you just paint that quite flat colour the first time round with the vermilion and the raw umber together. But then then when you've got the whole of the landscape in, suddenly, oh yeah, I can see it works. There's her hand in shadow against the sort of sunlit fields in the background. But just having said that, I'm just going to go through so many brushes. So I will use some other yellow later, but I'm going to blend this in a little bit. Working in this quite scratchy way, it's is it Waterhouse, the pre-Raphaelite painter, his paintings are built up like this, so very, very scratchy to begin with, and then they just start to get more and more and more refined over probably a fair few glazes. And this is, if I had a bit more time, I could just go around and yeah. I'm not going to put any yellow on now. No, I was thinking about it, but I won't. That'll be something. We'll just build into that later on. I can just sort of see the rough drawing that I need, even in this area. Okay, right. So I've got some brown on this brush, so that's fine. So I'm just going to use a little bit of this raw umber. I nearly put burnt umber on my palette. That's probably okay. I'm just going to quickly start doing this bit. So that's her dark hair there, and then it's quite soft. And so I'm not going to do too thick a coat of paint. You could mix some white in, and it's probably actually where it transitions into her forehead and her brow. That would probably be the last thing he painted actually. But I'll just paint up just for argument's sake to the drawing that I've done. Okay, and this is it's darker in here. Okay. I just have to make sure, just keep an eye on the drawing, because I'm going to probably lose it know, that's I've lost it already. Right, okay, let's just be careful. Right, so that's just pure raw umber there. This brush is fraying. It's just the darkest bits. But they're not, it's not that dark back here. I wonder, you probably painted this in one go. But the point of this, however Bouguereau did it, to be honest, is just to try and have a practice at blocking in. You can see I'm being a bit of a coward. I'm doing the hardest bit last. It's looming. I'm getting closer. I can just feel it. There's a lot more gold in that. But I'm going to use the brush. Just differences, you know, in the quantities of paint can create these different colours. I don't think I can use this brush anymore. I've got to snip that bit off, but I haven't got time right now. Right, so right, doing like that. So I've got a smaller brush just to do these areas. Some ochre now. Mix it into some of the white that was there. It's quite yellow though on this part of her scarf. Just comes down. It's quite dark at the edge actually again. And there is a pattern, but that would be the very last thing to do. And I'm just going to, when I do it, it'll just be a sort of indication. I'm not going to be too strict about it. Likewise, that's the way he did it. I'm going to do a copy of Jean-François Millet's Gleaners as well, just to show. It's very interesting to see the different interpretations, one by Bouguereau, one by Jean-François Millet, who was one of the great French realist painters. I'll probably just paint it in the same way. Millet was academically trained, but anyway, yeah, it should be good. Alright, it's very dark in this shadow area. This is something, I'm going to put some black with the raw umber and just try and get this and I think that's something I'm just going to achieve with a glaze. Watch my brush. Oh, that's just horrible. I'm just going to chuck it away. Okay, that's fine. That's enough for today on that bit. Just notice one thing. I haven't done this area. So I'm just going to do. Okay, so it's definitely dark around. That's all in the shadow. There's a little bit of shade there. And then this is and I can finish that properly. Oh, right, yeah, that's a nice brush, but it's just gone a bit too podgy. Okay, that's fine. Right, last but not least. So I'm going to use the brush that I was using for the sky and actually for her blouse. And I've got some vermilion, some ochre, a bit more, and we'll just see what this looks like. So I can paint up. I've got the well, it's in a lot of shadow there, which I'm going to add afterwards. But I was just mentioning, just thinking about the drawing. You know, I don't want the drawing to be too overpowering or too visible at all. But one of the best things with glazing is the ability to deepen shadows. So all of these areas around the eyes and the shadow of her right cheek, that should just be really straightforward to do. Right, so now just suddenly it's a bit lighter. A bit more yellow ochre. A bit more, so I'm just mixing. I've just got a bit of white, a bit of yellow ochre, just adjacent to where I was mixing before. Shall I show you my palette? That's kind of my working method. It's not that pretty really. But you know, I've just sort of been mixing up a colour and they're all sort of being interchanged, and you know, so that's the initial mixture for the bulk of her face, and then I'm just adding a little bit of white and a little bit of yellow ochre to create this highlight here. And actually it's more like that around this part of her brow and cheek. And her nose is lighter as well. Be careful. It's a better colour actually. I can do a bit of her arm. It's just got more yellow ochre. Yeah, so at some point I'm going to do a copy of, well, not a copy, I'll do a painting in using just a Zorn palette, because that's, you can just see it's amazing, just a bit of vermilion, a bit of yellow ochre, and then there's a great skin tone. Don't need all of this messing about with the alizarin crimsons and stuff like that. I mean, Bouguereau was he's a 19th century academic painter, but I'm going to do a Jean-François Millet one, a realist painter. But then you know, I've got a great love of painters from the Renaissance, so I've got plans to do some Rubens and Titian, Velasquez as well. I think you know, I've got a Caravaggio on the go, but I think probably Baroque and Mannerist art are my two sort of favourite periods. But stay tuned, because there will be many more of these sorts of interpretations. Okay, so I'm just looking for a small hog's hair brush. I haven't got, this is smallish. Right, and we're just going to do a little bit of shadow, a little bit of shading. So it's just a little bit of the raw umber and a bit more vermilion with some yellow ochre in here. Okay, so it gets quite dark around here, so just holding onto the drawing. I'm just going to paint in a little. Very dark in this area. Goodness me. The lips are quite dark, so that works out okay. And there's probably some. This is why I've been fascinated by Bouguereau's glazing technique. It's because you know, he uses a lot of green to create this coolness in the shadows, in the flesh tones, and that's just very appealing. And that's what I'm trying to sort of learn about mainly. So I'll go over with a green glaze. It's just this. It's the area around here. And it's similar. I'm sure he's just sort of gone over parts of the face as well. Probably not exactly, but you get the idea. It's just around in the neck. You know, it's just a dark. It's just a warm green. So it works quite well. So basically, I've just you know, covered it with this skin tone. It's just one or two shades of that. So you have the sort of slightly darker, slightly warmer. Then add a little bit more white with the yellow ochre, as you can see that I've just filled in this highlight here. And then I'm just going over it. And because it's quite slick on the surface, I'm able to just move the paint around a little bit and ruin it. No, not quite. Holding onto the drawing. And yeah, so I've just feel like I've landed with this shadow, so I'm just going to add a little bit. It's just around just her elbow. Alright, so one thing that doesn't look right, I'm just going to get a quick. Do I need that? Just got I was going to get a sable, but I'm just going to stick with the hog's hair just to do sort of, just see her eye is kind of just a bit greeny as well. But I am blocking in, so it's not final. Wow, that's pretty mad. Why it's not fully, oh my goodness gracious. So just don't want to lose the drawing above all. Right, just get my lighter brush. I can just cut back into it. The drawing's still there, I can still see everything. Now that's something that, you know, I just really do need to spend a while on, and take a bit more care over. So a bit closer up. So just mixing up a little bit more vermilion with the yellow ochre. Using the same light brush. Right, glazes can fix any problem, and so can a nice dry brush. But this is really as far as I want to take the blocking in today. For example, look, I mean her cheek's quite red, sort of here, but it's just, I don't want it to be too dark, but it just sort of gives a rough impression. And actually the flesh, the cheek, the jaw, it's all a bit darker, but I think that's something I'm just going to do. You might have seen my other video of copying a Bouguereau and just trying to sort of work out the glazing, and that was just based over a grisaille, and the second glaze was the really important one, and that's where it really changed. I'm just trying to give a rough idea, so please spend longer doing it. Please don't be as crude as this. So we'll leave it there for now. Next time I'll be able to show you how the glazing can just further deepen and enrich and smooth over any sort of blemishes or unsightly brush marks in near miraculous ways. So just hang on. Maybe actually while we're here, I haven't really done the eyebrow. That's just a little bit. Okay, so it's the kind of speeded up version of the approach that I might use if I was going to block in. I hope that's been useful. And yeah, I'll see you next time when I do the glazing. So here's the painting as I left it next to the original, and I was pretty pleased with it given the time restrictions. There are a few issues obviously all around, but one of which is the skin tones are very light, but that's okay because that's what I enjoy above all is glazing over those. So the glazing video is going to be available on my Patreon page that I've recently set up, and that is patreon.com/Matt Harvey Art.